AutoISO is the way to go. Well, some of you might think that why would a professional photographer use AutoISO? Shouldn't always be using the lowest ISO possible. And if you use AutoISO, what about the noise? I will talk all about these points that I've just made. So hang on, you will get answers to all of that. Hi, it's Peter here, and let's get right into the business. ISO is not the reason you get noisy images, it's something else. But before we get into that, let's talk about what ISO is. It's actually an electronic gain that will make the sensor more sensible to light. That is just a short and simple explanation. It's a bit more complicated, but I think you get the point, and I think that's the most important thing to understand. We tend to think that it's the high ISO that causes noise in our images, but as you can see from this image, that if I raise up the exposure on the image that is taken with the lower ISO, it has more noise in the image than the higher ISO image. So the reason for noise is not the ISO, but wrong exposure. Well, what can we do about it? Well, of course, get the right exposure. And what is right or correct exposure? It is when you're exposing to the right. You should make the image as bright as possible without clipping the highlights. And that's important. Do not clip the highlights, because if you do that, then you will lose all the information that's in the highlights. You will get a bright image, but in post, what you should do is to lower the midtones, usually, and sometimes lowering the highlights. That will make the image look a lot better, and it also will make the noise less visible. Another way is to lower the noise in noise reduction software like Topaz AI or DxO Pure Raw 3, for example. So if you feel that there is too much noise when using, like, let's say, like ISO 6400. But now you might think that I'm contradicting myself, because I just said that it's not the ISO that causes noise. But yes, if you take this same exposure value, the same EV for two images with ISO 100 and ISO 6400, yes, the 6400 will have more noise. But then to the question, why AutoISO? The exposure is a combination of three things: shutter speed, aperture, and ISO. Shutter speed affects the movement, how the movement or motion is shown in your photograph. So you might want to have fast shutter speed to freeze the motion, or lower shutter speed to show the motion. And with aperture, you decide how much depth of field you have in an image. Stopping down will make the depth of field bigger, and then opening up the aperture, you will have less depth of field. Simple as that. And ISO will make the sensor more sensible to light. If you high ISO, it's more sensible to light than low ISO. So with ISO, we can also control the exposure. Sometimes we want a certain shutter speed and a certain amount of depth of field. So we have the third one, which is ISO. We can raise up the ISO or lower the ISO. It depends on our artistic choice, what we have made the lighting conditions, of course, is one part, but then also the artistic choice. And when we're adjusting the ISO, we can set the ISO to auto, and it will automatically adjust to the lighting conditions automatically, and we don't have to worry about it. And then we can use the exposure compensation to adjust ISO. Simple as that. It's one part of the exposure pie. It's one element in that, making the correct exposure. Do you ever use AutoISO? Tell us in the comments down below, or is this nonsense, what I'm talking about? Well, try it and you will see that it's not. And then the question, shouldn't we be using the lowest ISO as possible? Yes, that's true. But it doesn't always mean that it is the lowest possible ISO that you have in your camera. Usually every sensor has a base ISO. It can be ISO 100, 160 or 200 or whatever. So you will choose the lowest ISO possible in that shutter speed, aperture, and lighting condition equation. Don't go necessarily to ISO 6400 if you don't need that. You can go lower and then play around with aperture and shutter speed if that's possible. Why do I use AutoISO? Well, a simple reason. It's the most convenient way to make the exposure. When I'm doing street photography, I will use P mode and set the camera to AutoISO. And I have set it so that the highest ISO on my Ricoh GR3X is ISO 6400. When I have the P mode with the front dial, I can adjust the combination of shutter speed and aperture depending what I want. If I want to freeze the motion, I will have a faster shutter speed, and if I want less depth of field, I will open up the aperture. Or if I want more, I will close down the aperture. And then AutoISO is the one that is changing, or ISO is changing. And then I make the exposure compensation with the back wheel. I think it's the fastest way, and I still have full control over my exposure. It's not the camera that will make the exposure for me, even though I'm using P. Do you ever use P mode, or what is your preferred mode from PASM? Please tell us in the comments down below. And here you can see another video about noise reduction in camera. There are a lot of valuable information, even though the video isn't exactly that new, but it will give you some more advice how to get the best possible noise level, or which is of course one that you don't have that much noise. That was pretty complicated to say. But anyways, I've talked too much. Go check out that video and comment what you think about AutoISO in the comments down below. But hey, thanks for watching and bye for now.